The Philadelphia Flyers have a huge decision to make ahead of their Game 2 matchup against the Carolina Hurricanes in the second round of the Stanley Cup playoffs, as with the potential for key pieces to be out for Game 2 and some possible lineup turnover, the Flyers are at a huge turning point and could have some major roster changes. So, today we're going to talk about Owen Tippett's potential unavailability for Game 2. We're going to talk about some lineup ideas that people have thrown around Twitter. We're going to talk about what I would like to see most from the lineup tonight, and then we're overall just going to talk about what to look forward to from the Flyers this game and moving forward in the series as a whole. Before we get into that, though, ladies and gentlemen, once again, if you've been enjoying these videos at all, if you've been enjoying getting in, watching my stuff, if you want to keep up with the Flyers in general, make sure that you hit the subscribe button. 95% of the people that watch these videos aren't subscribed. It's completely free to do, and it helps you stay up to date with the Flyers, stay up to date with me, and overall stay up to date with the playoffs as a whole. So, with that being said, let's hop straight into it. Ladies and gentlemen, the Philadelphia Flyers play the Carolina Hurricanes tonight for Game 2 in Carolina. And there is a lot to talk about. So number one, Owen Tippet is still day to day. It's still a game time decision for him. Rick Tocchett came out and said it last night that Owen is not a guarantee to be in the lineup tonight. I know that a lot of people were hoping to see him back in the lineup, as well as myself, because he's a player that's skill set could work very well against the Carolina Hurricanes in this series. He's incredibly fast. He's able to play physically, and he's also just got some great hands and some great shooting abilities. But the Flyers may very well have to make do without him. That being said, since the Game 1 ended, the Philadelphia Flyers have had a couple of people on Twitter and some very prevalent Twitter accounts and very prevalent people talk about the fact that the Flyers may need to have some lineup changes. And I am somebody that agrees with this. I think that there are some things that the lines that we had from Game 1 just aren't doing very well. So what you're seeing in front of you is the offensive lines from Game 1, and the only line of these four that I think you could safely say played a full 3 periods was the bottom line. Luke Glendening, Sean Couturier, and Garnet Hathaway have been stalwarts on the bottom line of the Flyers the whole playoffs. They were far and away the Flyers' best line against the Penguins, and they looked to be the Flyers' best line in Game 1 against the Hurricanes. And overall, I don't think there's much that you can touch there. If Tippett is coming back, it opens the door to move Hathaway out of the lineup, but until it's 100% known that Owen Tippett is coming back, I don't think that Garnet Hathaway can get moved out of the lineup. I don't think that Luke Glendening can get moved. I don't think that Sean Couturier is going anywhere anytime soon, okay? Couturier has still been the best player on the Flyers roster outside of Dan Vladar the entire playoffs, and he's not going anywhere. Outside of that, though, there are some people that have been talking, and I've agreed with some of them, that think that some of these lines, particularly in the middle six, need some turnover. Matvei Michkov has had a really hard time adjusting to playing next to Tyson Foerster and Noah Cates overall. Noah Cates is an incredible center defensively. He can hold his own offensively. And Tyson Foerster, on a good day, and when he's not in the slump that he's in right now, is a very capable offensive player. However, at the moment, Forster's not producing. Noah Cates isn't going to be able to be the driving force of an offense on his own, with just given his skill set and the fact that he's a much more defense-first oriented player. And it's none of that being alongside Michkov is really helping him succeed. So some people have thrown around the idea of maybe getting Michkov in inside Alex Bump's spot. Sorry, I can't speak. And putting Matvei Michkov next to Trevor Zegras on the top line. Now, this opens the door for this to be potentially a very, very weak line offensively. As, you know, Michkov, Zegras, Martone doesn't scream defensive prowess, which is something the Flyers are definitely going to need. However, and one of the bigger Flyers Twitter accounts, Flyers Nation, had mentioned this at one point. I wish I had pulled the quote. But the Flyers need to understand that if they try to tackle this series with the same every line needs to be balanced offensively and defensively, and we need to have a strong 12-man rolling system that can play offense and defense at the same level regardless of who's out there. The Flyers are going to get killed like they did in Game 1 every single game. They need to take some gambles. They need to throw out the idea of maybe having a more offense-first oriented line. And so the potential becomes, Michkov, Martone are two guys that have been incredibly productive. Martone was electric come starting his year off, despite starting late, and Michkov, despite being in a sophomore slump, which I should remind you is 50 points while having a slow start and being on the wrong side of the ice the entire first half of the season. Both of these guys are incredibly capable, and Zegras has been one of the best facilitators on the team all year. So I think that I am going to side with them on this, and maybe getting Michkov up to the top line next to Martone, or even putting Konecny up there if you want to try and preserve some of that defensive capability on that top line would be a good idea to not only get Michkov some new opportunities, but try and jumpstart this offense. Secondly, Rick Tocchet had said a couple of things after game one about liking Denver Barkey in a center role. Um, I I was pretty adamant in my previous videos about how I don't think that having Barkey in a center role full time is a good idea. However, if they wanted to put Barkey as like a second center on a line with, say, Christian Dvorak and Porter Martone, if they move Travis Konecny up to the first line with Zegras and Michkov, or even if they want to have an Alex Bump, Denver Barkey, and Christian Dvorak be on the same line, I think that having Barkey be able to swap out with Dvorak constantly and play almost like a dual center line works incredibly well. It's a nice balance of guys that are physical and guys that can play fast and can generate some offense. Alex Bump has been amazing all year. Denver Barkey was one of the better Flyers forwards in that first game. Overall, I think that that line could work really well. As for Forster and Cates, I really don't know what you do about Forster and Cates at this point. The Forster's got the yips. He hasn't been great all playoffs. Noah Cates has been Noah Cates, but unfortunately, him playing his absolute best is still not going to help the Flyers' offensive struggles nearly as much as you would need it to. Though, there is another way that we can get around this. What I am showing you currently is the Flyers' defensive pairings for Game 1. And right away, obviously, people have had their gripes with some of these players, all right? I've been very adamant about the fact that I think Rasmus Ristolainen needs to be exiled from the Flyers' power play. I think that he holds on to the puck too long, and I think he doesn't shoot. However, there is a glaring, we'll call it an ugly duckling of the Flyers' defensive pairings. Noah Juulsen is playing in a playoff series. I'm going to let that sit for a second. Every Canucks fan in a million-mile radius is losing their mind. Noah Juulsen, I think, is the first player on the Flyers that needs to go the second they decide to make lineup changes. This guy has to go. A brutal turnover in game one that ended up leading directly to a Hurricanes goal. He's been admittedly not great outside of the one game in the Pittsburgh series where he had 2 assists. And I really don't understand the logic for having him in over Emil Andre, especially considering Emil Andre can be a similar level of player. However, I don't think that Emil Andre is the solution here. I think that the solution to the Noah Juulsen problem is to finally give Oliver Bonk an opportunity to come up and play with the big guys. Now, this seems odd. Oliver Bonk is a very young and a very raw player, all right? However, as I'll get into in a second when I start showing you some of the lines from Twitter that I've seen recently, Oliver Bonk getting into the lineup could serve as we'll call it the first trial of this power play quarterback defenseman that the Flyers have been so crucially lacking all season. All right, Jamie Drysdale can kind of do this, although he has his moments where he kind of shows how young he is and the fact that he's not exactly the greatest guy for this role. But I think if Bonk really develops, and I think getting him experience in a playoff series and experience against a very high caliber opponent early will really help him in this role. I think bringing him in, even having him in as like the bottom pairing guy, not playing a ton of minutes, but getting him in on the power play when the Flyers get a power play could really help him. And who knows, maybe maybe he takes a lucky shot, maybe he gets a good pass off and has some good hockey IQ, gets a nice pass off, and the Flyers score a goal, even better. But I think that at this moment there isn't functionally no downside to taking out Noah Juulsen and putting Oliver Bonk or even David Jiricek in. Even though I like the prospect of putting Bonk in a little bit more than Jiricek, since Bonk is younger and has a little bit more time to grow into himself. But overall, I think regardless of who you put in, even if you put Emil Andre in, I think getting Noah Juulsen as far away from this Flyers lineup as possible is objective number one. We're going to take a look at some other lines, some lines that other people have talked about. This was an idea that Puck Therapy had mentioned on Twitter the other day. He had mentioned sitting Hathaway and sitting Bump and bringing in Jiricek and Tippett. Now, we don't know for certain if Tippett is going to be able to play. If Tippett's able to play, then bringing Tippett in and doing what he's suggesting here with sitting Hathaway and Bump to try and generate some more offense and have this kind of 11 forward, 7 defenseman setup, I think that that works well, but I'm not the biggest fan here of getting Bump out of the lineup. I think that there are other guys, and I think one of the guys that would benefit the most from maybe getting sat for a game just for the Flyers to throw stuff around and try and experiment with things would be Tyson Foerster. I think Tyson Foerster, if we're going to be sitting anyone to bring a 7th defenseman in, I think it needs to be him. He's had the yips all playoffs. Admittedly, he's been all right defensively, but on the offensive end, he's not producing well, and I know that there's the argument that he can get down low and he can win puck battles occasionally, and he can beat up Chip and Chase down to the boards. But if the Flyers want to succeed in this series against Carolina, if they want to even have a chance at stealing a game, 2 games, by some miracle 3, push it to 7 games, I think that they absolutely need to give Forster some time to rest himself and come back rejuvenated with a new head and maybe try and get back into the swing of things after a day off. Outside of this, we're going to talk about some stuff that I've seen talked about, some things that we should look forward to and look for in general going into this game. But before we jump into that, as regards to the lines, if there's anything that you agree with me right now on, or if there's anything that you think the Flyers should do lines-wise that I haven't talked about, or anything that I've mentioned that you disagree with me on, make sure that you let me know down below in the comments. I'll stick around after this video goes up and potentially after the game tonight to respond to some people, maybe give you guys my thoughts on what you're saying. But we're going to jump right into some things to expect this game. Now, Kendall Skaliki had talked about some areas to watch for game 2. Carolina is a very fast team, and this is something that if you watched even the first 10 minutes of that first game, which admittedly was kind of all you had to watch, you get this. The Flyers are a lot slower than Carolina is. It's not a pace of play kind of thing. It's just, physically speaking, Carolina is a lot faster than all of the guys on the Flyers roster. And it's going to be incredibly hard for the Flyers to get going if they don't adjust to the speed. And they, unfortunately, because of the short change that they got and the short amount of rest that they got, they're probably going to have to adjust to it now, or they're going to be so far behind they'll never be able to readjust and get themselves back into things. Secondly, if Owen Tippett's currently listed as day-to-day as a game-time decision. If he's in the lineup, great. If he's out of the lineup, it puts a magnifying glass on every other player on the ice, as I've already talked about. And then finally, special teams. The as Kendall's saying here, the power play has been bad all playoffs. I've talked about it a ton. Every Flyers media outlet that you can think of off the top of your head right now has talked about how bad the power play has been. Power play's got to get better, and that's part of why I'm trying to push for that Bonk Jiricek in for Noah Juulsen kind of thing, because I think those two guys can give it the jump that it needs. And then lastly, we had a quote from Rick Tocchett, where Tocchett has been talking a lot about how the Flyers have a lot of guys that have been trying to go for the home run plays, as he was calling them, and that in order to beat a team like Carolina, you can't go for the big home run splash plays every single time, and you need more to go in and go for like the singles, the small stuff that'll eventually pile up and help everybody out. And then finally, lastly, we got another instance of Porter Martone looking like a much, much, much better, much more experienced player than he really is. Martone got asked about his thoughts on the playoffs and just how he's been contributing so far and what people need to do moving forward. And Martone had he sounds like a multi-year veteran, talking about needing to win one-on-one battles, needing to find ways to create offense and create chances even through huge amounts of adversity like this Hurricanes team has been. And this is an incredibly bright sign, not only for Martone as an individual, but also for the young guys on this team as a whole. Because if the Flyers are this young and thinking this far forward and like some of the more veteran guys on the team, even when they're at such young ages, it says nothing but positive things about the Flyers. But with that being said, everybody, make sure that if there's anything I missed or anything you disagree with me on, you let me know down in the comments below. And make sure that you subscribe if you enjoyed this video or any of the other ones that I've put out. I will be watching the game tonight, and I may even have a reaction video afterwards for y'all. So with that being said, have a wonderful rest of your night, and go Flyers.